If you've been learning about any Warhammer lore at all, there's a good chance you've heard someone go on and on about how incomprehensibly huge the Imperium truly is. Well, today you're in luck because we're going to talk about the dystopian behemoth that is the Imperium and its actual scale. In specific, we'll be covering the number of worlds that the Imperium has claim over, the overall population of the Imperium, and just how many souls actually live within its bounds, the size of its territory in the Milky Way galaxy, and how exactly the Imperium actually manages to travel across this much space, and how they relay messages. What I'm hoping for is at the end of this video, you'll have a better concept of how the Imperium works, or at the very least, just the true size of what you're dealing with. When you're reading about lore, or hearing a cool story about how something happened, now you'll be able to actually imagine the physical space that the Imperium exists within. It's commonly cited that the Imperium has claim over 1 million worlds, but this number is likely higher due to the fact that the Imperium isn't known for its efficient administrative skills. To better understand the approximate size of the Imperium's population, we have to discuss what kind of worlds make up the larger Imperium, because the type of world wildly changes the estimated population, and knowing these estimated populations will give us a more accurate number to work with if we take this into account. So let's run down this list real quick. The most common type of planet are civilized worlds, which make up probably 40% of the worlds in the Imperium's control, which is a large majority. And each of these worlds, on average, have a population of about 10 billion people. Life on these planets is comparable to how we know Earth with cities and industry, and they pay regular tithes in the form of material goods, guardsmen, and more. Next up are agri-worlds, which make up about 20% of the Imperium's planets, and these worlds produce almost exclusively food to the star systems that they're in and beyond. These worlds tend to have a population of about 1 billion people, seeing as they aren't really meant to house large populations, more so just be maintained by properly trained personnel. The most famous of Imperial worlds, and most likely one you've already heard about, is hive worlds. They serve as massive sources of industry and are completely honed into serving their singular purpose and supplying whatever resource they've been designed to produce. But they are rarer than most think, making up about a guesstimated 10% of the Imperium's planets. That being said, despite being on the rarer side, hive worlds house over 100 billion people, and can even soar into the trillions, making them some of the most densely populated places in the entire galaxy. Besides those, which are either the most prevalent or popular amongst the Imperial worlds, there are unique and relatively rarer worlds like the Mechanicus' Forge worlds, which have an average of about 50 billion. Industrial worlds usually house about 1 billion people. Religious shrine worlds usually have about 100 million. They're a bit lower due to the fact that it's mostly reserved for religious pilgrims or priests that are maintaining the grounds. There are also feral worlds that have devolved into a much more primitive existence with next-to-no technology that serve as potent recruiting grounds for the warrior sects of the Space Marines, for instance. These worlds usually only have about 50 million people living on them due to the dire living conditions. Then there's feudal worlds, which are similar to feral worlds in the sense that they have regressed, but they simply haven't regressed as aggressively. Instead, they've returned to a simpler existence and, in general, resemble medieval times, ironically enough, with chivalric knight houses and peasants and farms and gatherings of, hut villages and everything. It's actually really cool. These worlds generally house 100 million people. And finally, there's death worlds, which are probably the single worst place to be in 40K's Milky Way galaxy, which is really saying something. They're also really another popular one, but they generally house about 500 million of some of the toughest sons of bitches that you'll ever find in the galaxy. If we took all of those worlds and drew a big fat circle around it, the Imperium would have a ridiculous hold over the Milky Way, taking up about 2/3 of the entire galaxy. So if we took the average of all my completely legitimate and factual estimations from each planet, we would have a population of about 16 quadrillion people. Now let me be clear, this is an educated guess, grounded in bogus math, and will never be confirmed by Games Workshop, because the mystery and vague tones of Warhammer are essential to the universe. But it also means that they will never deny my statements here, so clearly I'm right. Out of 16 quadrillion Imperial citizens, maybe 1 trillion serve in the Imperial Guard, which is the Imperium's standing army. So, for comparison, the largest standing armies in the world that we have today have 1 to 2 million active personnel. That means the Imperium has a standing active military of about 500 times larger than our modern day militaries. What about the Adeptus Astartes? Well, they lie somewhere between an estimated 1 to 2 million, so very comparable to our current standing armies. But as far as the grim dark universe of Warhammer is concerned, that's one Space Marine per 16 million worlds, which sounds absolutely insane. But Space Marines are expensive and worth every buck, so they still deliver their return on investment despite being so outnumbered. As for the Mechanicus, they might field tens of billions of their cyborg forces. And the Ecclesiarchy has its share of high-ranking priests, zealots, pilgrims, and their military wing, the Sisters of Battle. And their total population ranges in the hundreds of millions. But the vast majority of humanity is just cannon fodder, factory sludge, or forgotten altogether. So now we understand the scope of the Imperium just a bit better. There's a few important questions that arise. How does anyone get anywhere? And how do they communicate across the stars in any reasonable amount of time? Well, that's simple, of course, like all things in Warhammer. The Imperium uses immensely advanced technology called warp drives from a time known as the Dark Age of Technology to interdimensionally punt their ships through literal hell. And then, of course, you pray that you pop out where you want to arrive, and hopefully around the same century that you hope to get there. Now, you may think I'm exaggerating ever so slightly, but I'm really not. Welcome to Warhammer. Humanity has achieved faster-than-light travel, which is essential to get across the galaxy, of course, by piercing the veil between realities, and using psychic abhumans called navigators. And as long as everything goes to plan, it turns a trip that would take hundreds of years into a week or days. Now, to be fair, this can go horrifically wrong, but we're not going to get into that this video. Wow, the Imperium has such safe and reliable systems of travel. I wonder how they manage to send messages. They have another class of specialized psychic that screams messages across the warp and essentially snipes other psychics with this information. It's an agonizing process and can be unreliable on times, depending on several factors, biggest of which being the fact that you're literally screaming through megaphones across Satan's front yard. Who could suspect that would ever go wrong? I know I've been hammering the point home that the Imperium isn't really efficient, but a large reason as to why all the numbers in this video are very much educated guesses rather than hard numbers is the fact that the Imperium doesn't know the hard numbers themselves. The Administratum, which is basically the Imperium's pencil pushers and administrative wing, regularly screws up these numbers. One wrong file and entire star systems can become unregistered, lost, or misclassified. Entire sectors of space have been forgotten for centuries in lore, and there's this idea that the Imperium is too large to understand even by its own rulers. The way that any semblance of order or unity keeps this rickety carcass of a society together can be summarized in three simple sections: fear, faith, and fire. Fear is instilled by large, looming superpowers like the superhuman forces of the Emperor's Angels of Death, the Astartes, or the terrifying shadowy gaze of the all-powerful Inquisition. Faith is instilled through the endless drone of indoctrination and religious fervor, in service of something higher, something greater, the Emperor of mankind. Many planets are self-governing, and remain attached to the greater Imperium by providing what the Emperor demands, or answering the call of duty when he requires it of them. Faith gives them an all-encompassing purpose that serves as an excuse for anything and everything that is needed of them. Fire is the consequences when those two systems aren't enough, because nothing solves a case of heresy like a few healthy doses of lead, sci-fi lasers, or maybe even napalm if we want to be spicy. There's this grimdark notion throughout all of Warhammer that the Imperium is simply too large to fail but too broken to succeed, a self-sabotaging Goliath that is never weak enough to die, but never strong enough to pick up its own weight. I think the ridiculous scales of Warhammer can sound silly to plebeians who don't get it, otherwise known as normal people. But once you start poking at the universe a little further, I think it adds to the stupidly over-the-top vibe of Warhammer, and it somehow goes from really silly and horseshoes comfortably into super awesome. But what do you think? Was the Imperium bigger or smaller than you expected? What questions or subject matters do you want to see me cover next? Oh, and for the love of all that is holy, please like and subscribe.